Okay, so this video is going to discuss how to properly clean up topology and issues after using a Boolean modifier, basically giving you this terrible shading in topology here if we take a look. And I'm going to show you how to go from this over to this. Okay, so I'm going to add in a cylinder here, and keep in mind mine is on 64 vertices. I just think that gives us a nice smooth set of edges on here. Then I'm going to go into hops and Q, S sharpen this. And now everything is smoothed out. That basically just applies auto smooth and smooth shading, and I believe in hops it does 60. You can change it to 30, whatever. So yeah, we have the cylinder now. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and we'll just hop in here and delete out the bottom half like that, and then we can go ahead and scale up. Actually, what we'll do is we'll scale on the Y a little bit. We'll go back here and then scale this area on the X just a tad bit, nothing crazy. That looks good to me. Then we'll just go ahead and fill everything in, make this guy manifold. Fill that, and then fill the bottom here. So at this point we're going to get into the core of the video, and that's actually doing the Boolean cut. Now you can kind of see the shading's quite stretched here because we don't have any evenness going in this direction with loops. So I mean, you could go in here and add in loops to kind of make that shading nicer. But we don't want to do that from the get-go, because once we add in our Boolean cut, it's not going to have those loops extending over where that cut is, so that's going to be no good. Here's a quick example of what I mean. You can see once I applied a Boolean cut here, we don't have these loops extending through here, which is not what we're going for. Basically, let's wait to add in any sort of loop cuts. Let me undo all of this. Let's wait to add in any loop cuts here. You'll see why. So we're just going to go ahead and do our Boolean cut now. I'm going to add in another cylinder, rotate this guy, and maybe we'll go into side view. Q, sharpen that guy, and then let's just, rotate, get this cut roughly where we want it to be. Make sure it's the size you want it. So maybe what we could even do is go into viewport display and change this to a wire view. And just kind of see how that's going to look. Can scale it up more. You can kind of see where those intersection lines are and how the cutout's going to look. I think this is perfect, so I'm going to shift select this guy, control minus for that Boolean cut, and then we can make any final adjustments we'd like to make. So maybe pull this down a bit, and we'll hide the cutter. And let's go ahead and just go in here and apply the Boolean modifier and get to clean up. Okay, you're going to see we have this cut here now. I'm going to go ahead and go into hops and dice this guy. And go in here. This basically allows us to add in loops straight through object mode. One of my favorite features, so I'm just going to add in a decent amount. We don't need anything crazy really. We want these to roughly be square, not rectangle. I'm just going to make everything more even. Let's try this one more time. Increase a few more. So yeah, now we have a pretty dense amount of geometry, which is going to really allow us to clean this thing up, really allow us to clean everything in an easy manner. Because if we go in here and look, you can see all these near miss verts, right? If we didn't add in these loops going through here, like there's really no area to clean anything up. Like we're gonna just start sliding these guys and it's just gonna stretch everything. The shading's gonna be all skewed. There's simply not enough geometry in this example right here to allow us to clean up the shading in any decent manner. So yeah, we want to keep everything as consistent and square as possible, which is precisely why we're going to use dicing here to just make the geo a little bit more dense in the other direction as well. Okay, so some people like to straight up go in here and just add in a bevel. That way they can immediately see where the problems are coming in. You can see this is not looking good at all. But before I add a bevel, I don't even think it's worth testing it. I simply go in here and start fixing up all of the near miss vertices, and then when I think everything's fairly clean, then I test it with a bevel. So it really saddens me. People get panicked over these Boolean cuts and cleaning. The point of this video is going to be to ease your nerves on this. It's a really simple process. So what we need to do is start merging the near miss verts together. Right now, if we try to do it with a double tapping G, you're going to see that the vertices do not merge. So you have to go up here and make sure you have auto merge turned on. Just start sliding and slide this guy up here, slide this guy over here. Now there's not really a right or wrong in terms of where you're merging these verts. You just need to be smart with it. For example, I'm going to slide this guy here and not the other way around. If I slide this guy here, it distorts the curvature. That's no good. So when you're sliding verts, don't be careless. Actually think about what you're doing. But most of the time, it's pretty mindless work in my opinion. So we'll go in here. For some reason my auto merge turned off, so make sure that doesn't happen to you. Slide that in, slide this guy in. We could probably terminate there. We can always change things up later. We probably will anyways. Let's slide this up here, maybe slide this down here. Actually, I'll do this. I think that'll be fine for now. Don't really stress too much about the intricacies because later on down the line you can fix this stuff pretty easily. We're just trying to get the close vertices to kind of remove themselves, or else it's going to cause us artifacts when we try to bevel. So this guy's, this guy's probably fine, but I'm just going to terminate it there. We can always switch it up later if we want. I have a feeling this bevel is going to overlap at this one, so let me slide that. Now it does distort the curvature a little bit here. You can kind of see this face is going to be inconsistent, but it's such a minor change, I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So this guy's kind of close, merge that. Merge this guy. Up here might be a little bit tricky, let's leave it for now. And then I'm lazy, I don't want to do the same thing to the other side, so I'm going to go into object mode, Alt X and hops, change this to symmetrize over the X axis here. So now you can kind of see it has flipped. It's done the identical things we just did over here on this side. And if I were to undo it, take a look at this side. Look at the shading. A lot cleaner once we started merging. I also like to go in matte cap just because the shading is a little bit cleaner to me. That looks good. Okay, so at this point, let's go ahead and drop on a bevel, then we can really see where the issues are coming from. So Q and then bevel. I'll press N to harden the normals and just bevel this. Okay. So already we can see artifacts up in that corner. We can see the bevels really fat right here. So let's go in here and take a look. Looks like we don't have a connection point. Actually, maybe we do. Yeah, we do. We might just need to even this out a little bit. So let's take a look. That could have simply been a result of that vertex we merged. So what I'm actually going to do is shift select these two, join them with J. Let's fill this in to make a quad. Let's turn the bevel on. Okay, it's a lot more even now. We have a few artifacts here, so we can take a look at how to fix those. You can see on the shading kind of where the bevel terminates, which is roughly right about here, where the shading kind of gets flatter. So with this vertex, we can just select it and slide it just a tad bit. We're not going too extreme, so it doesn't matter. As long as it's a little bit of a change, we should be fine. Slide that guy. You can see now we have a pretty even bevel here, no real issues. We are going to have to check the shading to make sure there's no warping, but we'll do that later. For now, this thing looks really, really clean. Let's go up here and take a look at this. This is where the real issues are. Now sometimes it's hard to see the geo when the bevel's on, so feel free to turn it off with this little computer monitor button. Turn that off. What I'm going to do here is slide this vert up there. Let's see if that helps. Not too much. Let's undo it. Let's see what else we could do. Maybe we could slide this one here and then this one here. Let's see how bad that distorted things. Not really. I don't think it's a huge issue. Now, if it does really start kind of changing the overall curvature, I wouldn't recommend doing operations like this. I'd recommend finding a different solution. But in this case, look at how close the geo is. If you look at the curvature here, when I merge this, it barely changes. I don't think it's going to really be noticeable to anyone. I think it's fine, so I'm going to leave it like that. And of course, we can just symmetrize over here to keep everything clean. So Alt X and symmetry. Now right here, the shading's a little bit skewed. We can go in here and take a look as well. Now this is kind of caused by these two triangles meeting at their terminating point. I do not like how that's looking. So what I'm actually going to do is join this area, fill that to a quad, and still not too well. So we have cleaned up most of the geo here. There's not really too many artifacts or shading issues. But what I would like to do to kind of deal with these triangles terminating and, occasionally probably an n-gon here and there, like in this area, I'm just going to go ahead and use Mesh Machine and offset this area and then clean up that way. This is just a trick I use all the time when I'm doing this. So I'm just going to control click across here all the way around. like that. And then if we press Y, we'll go into Mesh Machine, offset this guy, scroll up so it's in the other direction, and I'm going to offset it just to about here. If you look at the vertices up here in the top, I kind of want them to overlap just about, so that'll be a good merge point. So right about there should be okay. And then this is probably going to make you panic. Don't worry, it's very easy to clean up. First of all, what we're going to do is go to this offset and just actually start sliding these points into each other to clean up the back area. You can also control click some of them. Slide this guy, and then let's see what we can do with this one. This one looks a little bit tricky. I'm actually going to stick with this side so we can just symmetrize everything. So yeah, this one looks a little bit tricky. I'm going to join these vertices here, slide this one, so now we have a quad in this area. You can slide this guy, and if you can't slide it, you might have to just go into vertex snap. Snap it that way. Let's turn off the bevel. We'll go ahead and slide this guy and just start cleaning up this really bad offset. Like I said, the offset looked like it was going crazy, and it was, but it really just comes down to moving a few vertices here and there. That's why sometimes it's just easier to turn off the bevel because it makes people less scared, including myself, honestly. Now I'm going to avoid skewing the offset edges. If I were to move this one, you can kind of see the offset edge here is uneven compared to these. So instead I'm just going to focus on moving these vertices around it instead. So let's turn that bevel back off, slide this guy, this one here, and then this one, which one? This one here, we'll slide this one. And then just to kind of even up this offset a little bit, we'll move that up. So look at this, and now we kind of have a loop cut going almost all the way around this bevel, which is pretty much what we want to make everything nice and clean. Now I do want to keep everything as even as possible, so right here is going to get a little bit tricky. Generally, if you can get a loop going all the way around cleanly, which is what we're trying to do, then you're pretty much good to go. But look at this, it terminates right at the triangle. We kind of want it to continue through, so we need to make this a quad, redirecting in this direction here. So let's just do a little bit of critical thinking as to how we could approach this solution. So one thing I want to mention, you're more than welcome to add loops to help you reroute and connect things up, as long as these loops do not distort your geometry and they're not going to cause you issues in general. Let me show you something. Sometimes you might need to add loops, or you think you will, in a sort of curved surface like this, but watch what happens if I start adding loops this way. Look what it does. It kind of gives you bad shading, and this is not a true curved surface anymore. This is kind of curved and then flat, 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 curved again. It's not consistent enough to call it a curved surface. But if we add loops in this direction, for example, it's not distorting the curvature at all. If we go into object mode, look, absolutely no issues with the shading here. Zero. You don't see anything because this is following the flow of the curves. Now we're not going to actually be using this for anything. I just wanted to mention it. You're more than welcome to add in curves as long as it doesn't distort the actual shading and curvature. Okay, the reason I mention this is because the first thing I would be thinking of in this type of situation, keep in mind we're trying to make this loop continue on around here, but it's stopping at the triangle. So at first glance I might think, okay, well it's completely fine to add in a edge loop this way because it's not distorting the curvature, and then I'd try connecting this up and making this a quad. Something like this is probably what I'd go for. Issue here is it's not going to flow along this area, it's just going to flow straight through. So this is actually not the solution we're going for, so let me undo this. So we need to think of a different approach. What I'm actually going to do is take this vertex, slide it down a bit. I don't want to slide it down too far, otherwise the curvature is going to kind of be not as consistent. You can get away with a little bit, just not too much, so maybe pull it down here. And then for this guy we could probably pull it up here, and then you can kind of see how much it kind of warps out the bevel. So let's even this out. We'll move it around here so it's even. That looks good to me. And now check this out. Look which way this curvature is flowing. All the way through. Now let's go in here and even this guy up, because look at this huge quad. I mean, it's probably okay in terms of shading. Probably won't notice too much, but That's still a pretty big difference in curvature because you can see how even the curves are going with these faces. Then we just have a stretch, which is going to kind of ruin the curvature here. So what I'm going to do is clean that up. I'm going to take this vertex, shift select this one, and then J to join. And then we can go ahead and fill in these two tries to make it a quad. And then if you want, you can slide this, make it a little bit more consistent. Don't really have to, but it's probably good just for good measure. And this triangle here is completely fine. This is a planar surface. The bevel is not going to really affect anything, honestly. If we turn this on, take a look. I don't see any real issues here. Now, I like to call these areas dead areas in the sense that I can have the most terrible geometry in these types of areas, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't affect the shading. But in turn, it helps me clean up other areas where the shading will actually go bad. And that's precisely what I did here. I just added in an edge that doesn't have any sort of effect on the shading. You can see that here, no problem with it. But this edge right here allowed me to clean up the curvature by simply moving this a little bit closer so it wasn't as warped in this direction. So yeah, feel free to use dead areas to your advantage. You don't have to worry too much about the geo. If I just connect up vertices here and just go crazy with it, I mean, this looks absolutely horrible. Look at this. This geo is terrible. But if we go into object mode and turn on the bevel, we don't care. We don't see any sort of shading issues. It simply doesn't matter. So yeah, these planar surfaces are super beneficial to us in many, many situations just because the shading is quite always flawless and you can use it to your advantage. So yeah, hopefully you see what I mean now by using this dead area to your advantage. So now we have pretty even curvature here. Maybe pull that up a little bit. Yeah, the curvature is super even. I don't really see any shading issues here. Let's turn on the bevel, take a look again. Everything looks really clean to me. Now over here we didn't clean up, but we're not going to. We're just going to Alt X and then symmetrize to the other side. So look at this. This geo is already looking a lot cleaner. And here's the #1 mistake people make, and it makes me sad because you do all this geo cleanup work and everything, but you don't finish the job. And the second job is shading. Shading is so important, and the shading looks good on the surface, right? I mean, this thing looks pretty decent. But the only way to really tell how bad the shading is to use a matte cap. So I'm going to go in here to matte cap, and I like to use this reflective one. This really starts to pick up areas where there's bad shading. If we just kind of hit it at certain angles, you can see if you look at the bright light, it starts warping. And the goal here to fix the shading is to stop the warping. So always use a reflective matte cap like this, and you'll pretty much see exactly where your shading issues are. So in my experience with hard surface, tiny triangles, kind of like this, tend to give more bad shading results than bigger triangles. Just my experience, maybe someone has a better solution or explanation. Usually what I do with these types of situations is I simply take these vertices and merge them and just produce a bigger triangle, and the shading's always a little bit cleaner, I'd say. If I undo this and redo, you can see what's happening. You can already see the shading's a little bit more consistent here. And if we go into object mode after, I mean, if there is shading issues, it's so incredibly minor that it's simply, I don't see any. And if there is, I don't think it's apparent enough to even worry about. But if you go in here, you're going to see, look at that. There's a pretty clear defined little stretch mark. So yeah, in my experience, I found that sliding the smaller triangles and producing bigger ones gives you cleaner shading. I don't know how well you can see this on the YouTube resolution, but there is definitely a much better difference in making a bigger triangle here. You do want to be careful, however, because if you start merging bigger and bigger triangles, you're going to completely distort the curvature here. Look at that. This area is going to be a lot more flatter, these faces, than these faces, so you don't want to go too far, because if you really start to distort the curvature, it's going to be noticeable. Minor changes are fine, but big ones are no good. Let me slide this a little bit. It's probably too far up. That's decent. Okay, we're going to go to these other triangles and slide them in. Just make a little bit of bigger triangles there. I think that'll be okay. Now at this point, all you really need to do is take the matte cap, look at it from an angle like this, and just look at the light and see if the light produces any distortions. If you get bad distortions, then there's a pretty clear signal, there's a shading issue. If it's pretty much flat and consistent the whole time, you're good. So what I like to do is just slowly pull through here. And very, very minor distortions are completely fine. That's probably going to happen around the triangles anyways. But you're looking for big distortions, big changes. So we're going to keep going through. This is pretty consistent the whole time. Let's keep going up. Go through here. Might be a little bit of warping in this corner. Let's take a look. It's not too bad. What I'm going to do though is just slide things around here. Just to make it a little bit more confined. It doesn't matter too much. I still think it's pretty clean. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. And by the way, the bevels are always going to have a somewhat weird shading just because of how they are, unless you have a super dense amount of bevel segments or you have a subsurf on. So if you're just doing generic hard surface, this is fine because it's capturing their reflection like it needs to. So yeah, around the bevels, don't stress too much about it. Looks good to me. What I'm going to do though is symmetrize, Alt-X, and then symmetry. Now let's go on the inside here because I have a suspicion we're going to hit some warping on the inside area. So same drill, use the light to your advantage. Pan through here, look for any severe signs of warping. You might not have any, which will be good. We can always cross our fingers and hope for that, but inside's actually looking pretty good to me. I'm happy with the result there. There wasn't really any sort of weird warping. We could even look at a steep angle, maybe on this side. Just look at a steep angle, see if we can see anything at all. Maybe we could go in and try a different matte cap. A shinier one maybe. And just look at a steep angle. I don't see any shading errors here. If you do, it's probably this matte cap here because the matte cap has this like glare going out. So don't confuse it. Let's go to this side. So yeah, this thing's actually looking pretty decent. I think we did quite well with this inside. As you can see, the curvature on the inside is super, super consistent up until, you know, around these triangles, but these triangles are not really causing any issues at all. The outside, we can look at the geo. Outside geo looks pretty clean as well. We do have these triangle connections, which is not always the most fun. So one thing I want to mention about reflective matte caps, and if anyone in the comment section wants to have a civil debate about this, we're more than welcome. This is going to help everyone as an artist. With reflective matte caps, they're meant to bring out even the deepest shading errors. If I were to go at some sort of angle, I'm sure at some point these triangles are going to capture a shading issue. It's going to be so incredibly minor though. I'm going to really try to look and find one. If I go at a certain angle, it's super hard to even see. Okay, I see a little bit of a shading error here. In the YouTube resolution, you probably won't even see it. There is a super tiny shading error here from this triangle. Now you need to keep in mind that we're using a reflective matte cap, which is really meant to bring out even the tiniest of tiniest shading errors in your mesh. So when you're using a reflective matte cap and you see a super minor shading issue, it doesn't matter because that's what it's meant to do. When you go into a generic render or a more solid matte cap, you're never in a million years going to ever be able to detect that minor shading error that the reflective ones capture. So I want to ease everyone's nerves a little bit in the fact that when you see a super tiny shading error that's never going to be noticeable in a render or anything, don't waste your time. This thing is good. Look at this. I'm going to even go into the normal matte cap. We clean this thing up and I see zero issues now. This is basically as good as the render is going to get in terms of shading. And there's no issues. We cleaned up all the big ones, so don't stress about it. If we go in here and look at the geometry, look at how cleanly knit and tight this geo is. The only areas where we're really going to have any issues are around these triangles, and like I said, they're just simply not noticeable. They're not. You're never going to see them in a render. So here's our final result, guys. I want people to stop stressing out so much about just the perfect quad geo and this and that. It's all about shading, especially if you're doing concept renders. It's a topic that is so overly hyped that it damages people as artists. Do what you need to do to clean the shading, and anything else you need to do, that's secondary. Clean the shading first. The shading's good. Look at this. We have nice geo, some triangles here and there. I don't even think we have any n-gons actually. this thing just looks good. I mean, we do have these n-gons here, but they're planar surfaces, so they don't matter. But yeah, that's about it for this video. I really hope this helped you guys out in some way or another and kind of gave you more of an idea of how to clean up Boolean cuts in this manner. If this helped you guys out, you can definitely go follow me on Instagram or Twitter, links in the description, and you can see a lot of my artworks, most of which I promise you do not have perfect quad topology, so you can kind of get more reassurance there as well. Anyways guys, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.